Welcome to my training on creating inclusive, high-performing teams. I'm Dr. Kathy Obear, and I use she, her pronouns. I'm the president of the Center for Transformation and Change. We prepare leaders, change agents, and facilitators to spark transformational change as they create greater equity and inclusion throughout all their organizations. Now, today, I'm sharing with you many of the skills I wish I had had in my toolkit when I first started as a new manager, as a facilitator over 35 years ago. I would have been far more successful and a far better value to my organization if I'd had these tools. For the last 30 plus years as an organizational consultant, I've trained and coached leaders, employees, and trainers at hundreds of organizations to deepen their capacity to develop inclusive, high-performing teams that accelerate productivity, increase innovation, and minimize difficult situations, those situations that often result in unnecessary tension and conflict in the workplace. I want to share with you several of these critical skill sets. As I do, imagine what could be different if you had a cohort of trained, skilled facilitators who could lead meaningful, productive workshops to deepen the capacity of all leaders, all employees, to create inclusive, high-performing teams throughout your organization. So just imagine, what's your vision of an inclusive, healthy, productive workplace? Can you imagine work environments where all employees thrive? They feel a deep sense of belonging. They feel respected for who they are, valued for their work, and they contribute to their full potential. Can you imagine an environment where all employees work collaboratively, and they work collaboratively to create productive, innovative products and services, where they develop new solutions to meet the ever-changing needs of the increasingly diverse clients you serve? Do you want a workplace where all employees take the initiative to anticipate and fulfill customer needs? Now, can you imagine your teams working collegially to minimize silos as they produce high-quality work the first time without wasting time and resources redoing sloppy work? An organization, a high-performing team, it's like you're riding the perfect wave. Everything's in balance, perfectly aligned, a beautiful sunny day, and it is possible. Yet the reality in most organizations is far different from this vision. So many teams and organizations I've worked with face daily struggles as they experience miscommunication, misunderstanding, increasing tension, unproductive conflict. And then the finger pointing starts, the blame games, the workplace gossip, projects and services miss the mark. And then employees often dread coming to work. They're just counting the hours, the minutes till they can leave. They do the minimum to get by. They're physically there, but not fully present and definitely not engaged. Today, so many employees just feel plain tired, if not exhausted, burned out, running on empty. And top talent, they're leaving through a revolving door, especially employees and leaders with the greatest cultural competencies, the life experiences that are so critical to serving our increasingly diverse customer base. The current workforce often does not reflect the group memberships of the clients we serve, we want to serve, and leaders are facing increasing demands from employees, from clients, from boards, from regional groups to have greater demographic diversity among the leadership team as well as the employee base, all with far greater competence, far greater capacity at all levels of the organization to create innovative, responsive, inclusive work environments and services. Too often, leaders and employees just feel stuck, tried everything they know, and have little clue what else to do. And so they're sitting there thinking, now what? High-performing inclusive teams and organizations don't miraculously form on their own. It takes intentional, persistent planning, training, leadership innovation, leadership intervention to create, maintain, develop them. Now, did you ever go to a circus and wonder how the performer could keep running back and forth, keeping all those 10 plates spinning on top of each individual pole without letting them fall and break? Well, to me, that's just like leading a team or a larger organization. We can't take our eye off of all the people, the vision, the goals, the daily group dynamics, the changing customer needs, or their fall and shatter sometimes beyond repair. And so today I want to talk about 4 sets of leadership skills and competencies that I believe are essential for developing and maintaining inclusive, high-performing teams. Skills that can be taught, reinforced, and continuously improved if you have the internal infrastructure of trainers, facilitators, leaders with the capacity to train, upskill, and develop the full breadth of your leaders and employees. Now, I believe this session will be most valuable for any leader, supervisor, or what I call inclusion facilitators, who are team members who want to develop a deeper capacity to partner with their leader as they work together to train all employees to develop inclusive, high-performing teams. So here are the 4 sets of skills we'll do today. First, how do you form an inclusive, productive team from the start, or refresh your team's effectiveness at team meetings or even a mini retreat? Second, what can you do when unproductive behaviors of some employees continue to undermine group effectiveness? Now, the third set of skills and approaches I want to focus on: how do you help people create and revise policies, practices, programs, and services with an inclusion lens, designed to better meet the needs and exceed the expectations of your increasingly diverse customer base? And finally, the fourth set of skills and approaches I'll cover today: what can you do when leaders and team members begin to feel that burnout, a little fried, little fringes around the ears? So the first set of skills and approaches: how do you form an inclusive, productive team from the start, or refresh your team's effectiveness, team meetings, or retreat? Well, the first thing you need to do is get really clear. What does an inclusive, high-performing team mean to you, your team, your organization? We need to have this vision because teams and organization leaders need to have these conversations, and they're often more effective if they're facilitated by an internal facilitator. We need to have clarity and consistency, a shared understanding of what we mean by an inclusive, high-performing team, an inclusive organization, and more importantly, why these are critical to organizational success. You have to have a facilitated conversation to help clarify your destination, and that will serve as a compass to keep moving in the right direction. You then need to ground all of what you're doing in the vision of inclusive, high-performing teams. You do that within the strategic goals and mission and values of the organization. Where do we want to be? And then we can identify the current state of the climate and the culture at the team level and throughout the organization. But before we begin to assess the current dynamics, to help the team be ready to do that, I think it's critical we celebrate progress, how far we've come. So in a team meeting, in a retreat, hopefully maybe you as a leader have these skills. If not, you can bring in some facilitators. Have people find a partner and discuss as a team. Reflect on the progress of the team of the last 6 months. And here's what I'd like them to think about. What are 3 to 5 individual efforts that have helped us achieve organizational goals? Now, that can be what they did themselves, but we really like them looking across the team. What have other team members done? And then to get the collective energy thinking, what are 3 to 5 collective, collegial efforts that have helped us achieve organizational goals? Now, you may want to give people a chance to reflect on that individually, make some notes, then they find a partner, and then talk about as a large group to really celebrate. It's critical we start with success, positive changes, progress, before we start reflecting on what can be improved. You start with strengths, and then you go to gaps. We have to focus on both how far we've come and how far we need to go, and it gives the team the energy to engage in conversations about where are we now, how close is our current state to our vision of an inclusive, high-performing team. Now, to do that, it may be helpful to break it down into some key elements on what is inclusive, what is productive for our team, our work environment. And I like to use these types of continuums to address the current and desired state. And I literally get people up and moving. Now, again, you may want people to reflect. You may want to produce these onto a worksheet so people can think beforehand, make their mark. You'll probably have a lot of reflective learners, introverts, in addition to your extroverts. And so then literally have people move. How effective are we? Not at all to very effective around our decision-making and planning. And then you have people maybe turn into a partner, talk about why they chose that number, and discuss as a group. That could be a whole meeting in itself. Then collaborative, team building, the degree of team building, how much collaboration do we have? How productive, how creative are we? And that might be two different conversations. What is our capacity to recognize, interrupt microaggressions and unproductive behaviors? Now, they may not know that term microaggression. Dr. Darrell Tsu has publicized that in the last several decades through his writings. Those daily indignities, those moments, those comments, the behaviors, actions or inactions that can leave people feeling dismissed, unincluded, not valued. And they add up, they build up into cumulative impact. And so some people may think that was not a big idea to interrupt the person, but if that's the fifth time they've been interrupted, particularly by folks in marginalized groups, it can really leave a bad taste in folks' mouth. And then there are a few other continuums I'd like to suggest. 0 to 10, how well and effectively do we value and respect the differences among our team, meet the needs of the differences among the clients we serve? How well do we support the learning and growth of others through professional development, individual coaching, just peer connections? How effective do we communicate, engage each other, particularly this last one, when we're in disagreements and conflict? How effectively do we resolve them? Not stuff and smooth over, but actually to have those crucial conversations. And so it's important that as team members, we have engaged, authentic conversations. Now, these may need to be facilitated to increase the bravery of the group, but we have to identify our current state, where we want to be, and the gaps, so that we have this idea of where we are as a performing team, an inclusive team, the current state, and how do we move to an even more high-performing team. And then in each of these conversations, you can have your facilitator gather ideas to how do we move closer to the vision. Now, I want to share some of the tools and strategies that I use to create high-performing, inclusive teams from the start. And again, you can use these to refresh team dynamics whenever you come together. Now, if you're beginning to think, it's not my job, you're not alone. Many managers have not been trained, supported, or held accountable to do this, but it is critical to organizational success. And if you follow Brené Brown, want to share one of her quotes, and you might have heard other people share this over the decades, that leaders must either invest a reasonable amount of time attending to the fears and feelings of folk, or you're going to squander unreasonable amounts of time trying to manage ineffective and inappropriate, unproductive behaviors. The tools I'm about to share can help us be much more planful and proactive to minimize problems and unproductive dynamics before they undermine team dynamics. Now remember, you don't have to do it alone. Your organization can develop a cohort of trainers and facilitators to partner with leaders and managers in the room, in meetings, in retreats, to create inclusive teams and inclusive organizations. Now, after conversations about the vision of a high-performing team, an inclusive team, and we're acknowledging the team's progress, you can have people in partnerships, new ones, talk about their personal passion. Have them take some notes about what is their passion, their commitment for creating an inclusive organization that accelerate the persistent success, the full range of our colleagues, all employees, and our passion for creating inclusive policies, practice, programs, and services to meet the needs of the full breadth of those we serve. Have them reflect, talk in partnership, and then share as a team. 4, 5, 6 people talking about passion. We have to get people out of their heads into their full bodies so that they remember why we're here. It's not just a paycheck. That's important, but we really are here to be of service to those we work with and service to others. Now, the next useful step to proactively minimize unproductive team dynamics is for the group to collectively co-create, revisit, and revise norms they may have set up or do it from the first time. And so it's important you identify how we've been working together effectively and then set new agreements for how to increase teamwork, collaborative efforts, productivity that will minimize unproductive team dynamics and microaggressions. So to do that, you might want to have people find a new partner and first talk about a highly effective, productive team they were ever on. It could have been a sports team, theater group, it could have been a classroom, it could have been in their neighborhood. How did people engage in ways that were effective? Might have been a workplace. How did people engage that really contribute to productivity, creativity, and teamwork? Have them tell that story and then talk about it in a large group. What were the specific behaviors? What the leaders do? What employees do? How do we do professional development that got us to be a high-performing team? Now, next, Share about a not so effective team. And what were the unproductive behaviors that undermine team effectiveness? What did people do? What did people not do? What did the leader do, not do? And again, no names in either of these. But have people discuss and partners and then share. Identify what were the behaviors, again, that increases productivity and what were the behaviors that undermine. And then ask the team to create and maintain our best working environment so we provide exceptional service, meaningful productivity, and inclusive, supportive workplace for all. What engagement guidelines do we want? Now, you can use this list. I've used this over 30 years and adjusted it here and there. You also may want to pull out one the whole organization uses and have people explore these as well as other engagement guidelines that help us be a high-performing, inclusive team. What I might do is have people individually note which ones we're already doing and what's been the impact, and which ones do we want to add or do more of so that we are more effective. Now, some teams may find it useful to first do another activity to help people get warmed up, identify what they want and don't want. But if this is enough, you can have people discuss, negotiate, agree to these, and then come back to them every so often, have them on every agenda, and make sure you really adhere to these. But many groups do better if they first talk about what are our principles of engagement. And so you can have people in groups of 4 to 5, or if you only have about 8 people, maybe 2s or 3s with a chart pad and some markers. And have them brainstorm what are behaviors that foster teamwork, inclusion, productivity. Either we already have them or I've known about them other places. And then have a line down the middle and have them discuss what behaviors cross a line. Discuss and list. Now, this is a brainstorm, so it's not wordsmithing. We're not debating. If someone says this is a behavior that crosses a line, we put it up. And after a few minutes, if you notice people have 5 or 6, then ask them to leave theirs there and then move to look at one other group's. Check off what they like, add a few more, and move on to another group. And maybe 3 or 4 times have them look at different people's groups. And then come back as a large group to discuss as a team, what did you notice, what were the themes, and therefore, what kind of community engagements do we want? And then it's important to talk about how can we work together to ensure we pay attention to these guidelines in all meetings, one-on-one interactions, customer service. And they might say, let's keep them visible. Let's have them a chart on the wall or on every agenda that we have. And then you need to be doing, in my opinion, mini retreats every quarter. Have people come back, what are we doing that's effective, and how do we need to adjust so we really do adhere to the agreements we have so that we can continue to perform at a high-performing stance. Now, even with good, consistent team building, with the co-creation of these types of engaging guidelines, there'll still be times that people have behaviors that cross a line. So the second set of skills I want to highlight today is what can you do when the unproductive behaviors of some team members undermine group effectiveness? Now, proactively, we need to increase the capacity of each and every team member to pay attention to dynamics, notice group interactions with an inclusion lens by group membership. And to do that, the next couple skills can answer this question. Do all members feel valued, respected, included in all of their group memberships? And how would you know? It's a critical skill for supervisors and employees to have what I call panning or pay attention now. Now, I'm really grateful to LCY Cross Associates. Their work of tracking about 3 decades ago was when I first learned this skill. And I call it panning, pay attention now, because I need acronyms to remember things. The skills are you notice behaviors and practices all around you, notice your own, with an inclusion lens by group membership, meaning new employees compared to more experienced, hierarchically more higher position folks to folks that are entry level. Folks that are older, younger, folks that are white to folk of color, indigenous. Folks identify male, folks identify female. You're paying attention to all the different group dynamics with an inclusion lens to notice just the facts. What did somebody do? What's the pattern of behaviors? Who speaks, who doesn't? Now the skill, which will take a lot of training, is to be able to notice and describe the facts that you pay attention to. You pan without any judgment, interpretation, or assumption. So that's hard. But just like a video camera takes a wide angle lens and pans, gets a panorama of the group dynamics, or an individual interacting with another, you see the multiple behaviors and multiple nonverbals, to be able to describe what you see without making assumptions. Oh, you were rude. Oh, that was really offensive to say. I noticed when someone was talking, you started to have a side conversation. Can you tell me what's going on? Just describing without calling people names or making assumptions and labeling, because then folks will shut down and withdraw or act out in ways that will just escalate. Let me give you a quick example of the kind of skills that could be useful that you're using. How would you know? Pay attention to who's talking. Train your employees and facilitators to really pan common group dynamics. Who's quiet? How are people reacting non-verbally to each other? Whose ideas get considered or discounted, what I call plop. Who interrupts who gets interrupted? Again, by group membership. If you just watch 2 or 3 meetings, you will start to see patterns if you haven't already. Who do people look at when they're talking? And who do people look at when others are talking, particularly if it's beginning to feel a little uncomfortable, a little triggering? There are many more of these. I usually give people a list of, 20 or so to be paying attention to. Individually, you can train the entire group to do this. And I want to suggest you have a role, maybe a process observer. You have a facilitator, maybe a note taker, but then somebody in each meeting who has this longer list of tools that is watching the dynamics and supports the leader, because the leaders can't see everything. So they have the permission and responsibility to come in and intervene to help shift dynamics or name what they see going on. Let me tell you a story. A couple of years ago, I was asked to work with a senior leadership team, about 18 to 20 people. They were having some really unproductive group dynamics and decided they wanted some facilitated, authentic dialogue. So I came in, taught a number of these skills. Even in the workshop, I noticed a few were dominating airtime, a few others were quiet, not contributing, a few were talking over, and then a couple got into some debating conflict style. So I just gently said, so what are you noticing in our group dynamics and what feels familiar and not familiar? I taught people to not only notice the dynamics, but across differences, to use an inclusion lens. And this was just some of the differences that we talk about, to pan the group dynamics with an inclusion lens. Is there a differential experience by group membership? Now, in this case, as we got more honest, they reflected on this meeting I was in, as well as past ones. They described, there were some dynamics that had people feeling included, but mostly excluded by gender, sex assigned at birth, between men and women particularly. Hierarchical level, they noticed a difference in how much airtime and how people responded depending on your status in the organization. Years of experience, there were in-groups and out-groups, inside jokes, and by race. What they noticed was that when folks of color talked, they didn't get the same attention, the same amount of airtime as when white people talked. Now, this is not always easy for folks on your own to recognize and get honest and admit, and to be able to go back and work together. So this is a very advanced team building, team development, conflict mediation type of workshop. But during our day of team building, they learned a wide variety of tools. They decided to use process observers moving forward, felt comfortable enough with the skills they could do it on their own, and they wanted to become more of a high-performing team. So about 6 months later, I was at a conference and I ran into one of these folks, and they said that they had been significant improvements in the team dynamics, the productivity. I was delighted. Then I ran into someone else about 18 months later. They said they had a new vice president and they still were using process observers in every meeting, rotating them so that everyone, even the new folks who joined, were developing the skills. And most exciting to me is each of these top leaders had taken the same skills, the same handouts, resources, back to their own direct reports and had them reflect on their group dynamics with an inclusion lens, practice panning, and they had process observers in their meetings as well to hold each other, and particularly them as leaders, accountable for developing high-performing teams. These type of tools raise everyone's awareness of the types of unproductive meeting behaviors that can occur and interrupt in the moment. Now, it can help to have a list of unproductive meetings. I have a list of about 40 that I use in my trainings that I have people review and note which ones have you observed, which ones have you done, and most importantly, what's the probable impact on team effectiveness, team relationships, customer service if we do any of these unproductive behaviors. And so as you review these on the slide, how many look familiar? How many have you done? Are there inappropriate comments and jokes in meetings you're in? Do some people still belittle the comments of others in meetings or in gossip behind closed doors or out in open spaces? Are there side conversations? Every place I go, I see, but also people tell me that people are dominating conversations, taking up lots of airtime, particularly if they're in a privileged group identity in that moment. Have you seen people make snide, sarcastic comments? That's one of mine that I can do in a split second. I have to pay so much attention to not impact others. Often in our urgency, time matters, kind of that white culture dynamic. When we jump in and talk over others, it feels like we're dismissing or ignoring the import of others. And our comments might actually be dismissive and ignoring others. Do you still have folks in organizations that are overly aggressive, forceful style to get their voices heard, raise their voice maybe, try to silence others, talk over others? I still see people, to me, and I'm the facilitator in these workshops, patronizing, condescending manner. And I hear all the time that folks are taking credit for other people's ideas, other people's work. And that happens if we're not acknowledging comments in the moment, particularly if folks have one or more marginalized identity and they're not heard as often. We really have to pay attention to whose voices bring up great ideas, or we're going to lose all kinds of innovative, productive ideas. It is critical that teams honestly discuss the negative impact that these and other behaviors have, even if they're unintended. And they're particularly harmful if they're from someone in their privileged identity to someone in the corresponding marginalized. We then have to discuss as a team what can and should and will we do when these types of behaviors occur. Great leaders, they don't tell you what to do, they show you how it's done. So supervisors, team leaders, facilitators, we all need to be modeling effective ways to notice and interrupt unproductive team behaviors, and always empower, skill up, and expect all team members to do as well. Now, people are going to need a toolkit, so I want to just offer a few of my favorite tools. You have some already. It just might be we need to talk about them, retreats, oil them up, remove the rust, use them more often. And then there might be a few to add to toolkits. We already talked about panning, noticing ourselves, noticing others with a group lens, interrupting behaviors. Ask, teaching people how to ask, not closed-ended questions, but open-ended questions and a wide variety to clarify, to connect, to explore, help me understand, to have the person reflect back on the impact of their behavior. There are probably scores of questions that are great, that especially in difficult moments, conflicts, can really help people engage. We need to teach and have people practice how to interrupt. It's one thing to pan and notice it, but to choose courage, use your voice, to engage in a way that you'll be heard and have the person engage you, not shut down and get angry and defensive. Critical skill building has to happen over and over and over again. And a couple other skills I love, relating in. When I engage and interrupt others who may have had an unproductive moment, I first like to ask myself, can I relate to who they are and when have I done something similar? And I'll probably say something like that. Like, last month I remember saying something really similar and I didn't realize the impact I had then. I want to slow down, and as you think about it, what impact do you think you had when you said that? Notice I did a relate and an ask. And I also was doing a share where I shared a story. You can also share feelings. You can personally share the impact of what somebody said. I tend to like to come in more gently at first, meet people where they are, relate in, I'm just like you. Here's what I've learned. Second or third time, I might be a little more clear. But the first time, I like to trust most people didn't know what they were doing and weren't aware of the impact. I want to help them facilitate that moment so they can really see what they could do differently next time. So whatever tools you offer your team, it's important they practice. What would you do if? Get some case scenarios, have them practice how to respond, intervene. And a facilitator can lead these discussions in team meetings and mini retreats and workshops, because it's important we have to discuss how to use these tools in real time when we're in situations in meetings, workshops, task forces, because we have to be brave enough to start a conversation that really matters. Margaret Wheatley. Leaders and team members need to increase our competence, our confidence, and have to understand we're expected and we will be held accountable for creating and maintaining inclusive, productive, high-performing teams each and every day, each and every moment. Yet even with good team building, good training, good skill practice, there still may be times when people do not react effectively. And that's usually when we've hit a hot button, when we feel triggered. Now, I want you to think about a recent time you had a hot button. Maybe you disoriented, reached a boiling point, something pushed you over the edge, set you off, all kinds of different ways to talk about if you don't like the word triggered. So do you remember you felt an unexpected wave of emotion that almost seemed to come out of nowhere? That as you look back was probably out of proportion to the situation because you might have been a cumulative impact? Were you knocked off balance, knocked off your game? Couldn't think as clearly. And maybe you reacted a little less effectively. And if you were able to get more grounded, it took lots of focus, effort, and thought to come back to center. I believe on high-performing teams, we have to introduce this concept and get people skilled up to navigate when they have a hot button and when other people do. Now, you started this if you negotiated engagement guidelines the way I was suggesting, but it's important to go in these skills much deeper. Now, you can start by having people share some of their warning signs. Ask, how do you know you're starting to feel triggered? How would we know? And people could just share. Now, if the team is already pretty developed in their trust and authenticity, it can be really fun to have people give each other feedback. Now, I do like to have the leader go first. And the leader asks, how do you know I'm beginning to feel triggered? Now, if it still feels a little scary because a hierarchical level, people can just write it down, fold them up, share them, and read them aloud to the leader. And hopefully the leader will take it with good humor and laugh and go, yeah, or I didn't know you knew that. After people laugh and the leader acknowledges, all right, they can then say a few more clues. And then see if somebody else wants to say, what about me? How do you all know I'm triggered? This really can loosen people up and it normalizes. We can talk about hot buttons, feeling triggered, and know that when they happen, we don't have to stuff it. We don't have to keep pushing through. Because often in those authentic, real moments when there's been a hot button, a trigger, there's a lot of energy and innovation that can be harvested if we just slow down. And the relationships of trust, team building can really be accelerated if you have good facilitated discussions, dynamics when there are triggers. So you're still preparing folks. You then say, so when you feel triggered, how do you often unproductively react? And that can be some reflection. There's some handouts you could probably find online. Do they go into fight, debate, competitive? I'm right, you're wrong. Do they go into freeze? I don't know what to do, shut down. They go into flight, get me out of here. Now that can be still in the room, but they're looking at their phones, they're looking at their watch. They're just trying to do anything but be present in the moment. And then I like people to think about one I think I came up with, flounder, where you try something, but you're swirling so much, it doesn't work. You try something else, you're not grounded. And actually, my floundering escalates tension and anxiety and frustration in the room. So we need to notice what are our unproductive reactions, how we impact others, and have that conversation. We also need to notice that when others have these unproductive reactions, what do we do? So when someone starts fighting and two people get really competitive debating, sometimes people shut down, or they may jump in and fight back, or some people say, I have a meeting, and they leave. And so you might be able to do this conversation on your own, but having a facilitator lets you as a leader be much more involved in the conversation authentically. And you can really have great team development engagement. Now, the next step is to have people talk about, so what are your common triggers? Now, again, people can guess what each other's are, but you may just want to collect up, you can have people write down what are your top 5 in one meeting, put that together in a handout and bring it back to the next meeting and have people check off, is it I get mild reaction, no reaction, maybe medium or even a high emotional reaction when these happen, and then have people talk about how they have or might react in these type of situations on the team, in meetings across the organization, working with customers. And more importantly, it's important, what can we do as a team when one of us feels triggered, we think someone else is a hot button, or we think a lot of people are at a hot button? How can we support each other, have authentic conversation? What can we do to navigate those moments? Take a deep breath, because right now it may be important to remember Brené Brown's quote, leaders must either invest a reasonable amount of time attending to the fears and feelings of everybody, or you're going to squander unreasonable amounts of time trying to manage ineffective, unproductive behavior. And so I think it's best to check in with a team at least once a quarter, do regular professional development trainings, and then in every one-on-one, how are you doing? What's up? Any feedback you have for me? Any place you're feeling stuck individually with the team and our relationship? And then you want to take the pulse of the team every month or so. Just ask, how are we doing on team dynamics? Has there been any cumulative impact of things we haven't addressed you want to go back and talk about? And definitely in many team retreats, always go back to those engagement norms. How are we doing? What do we need to do better? All of this can help us be a high-performing team. Now, the third skill I want to talk about to create high-performing inclusive teams: how do we create and revise policies, practices, programs, and services to better meet the needs and exceed the expectations of your increasingly diverse customer base? Well, first of all, you need to know who your customers are by group membership. And if you're not out in the community, if you're not doing surveys, if you're not getting feedback about what's working, what's not, what their needs are, start there. But I'm assuming you know who your customers are. And so therefore, you begin to realize if your current programs and services meet their needs or not. Now, early in my career, I was never trained on how to do this. I just thought, oh, it's a good idea. And I would do a workshop or program. We would do this leadership activity. Now I train people individually and collectively how to analyze programs, policies, services, practices with an inclusion lens. It's a powerful set of skills for your team members, for any task force, any cross-organizational project team, and at any lessons learned meeting when you're looking at what worked, what didn't, to analyze maybe why it didn't, how to improve it next time. So you can start with some basic questions, truly to use these in every single meeting. This is free professional development. Every planning, every decision-making conversation. Before you make a decision, do we have the full breadth of people we need at the table? Have we gathered and seriously considered the input from a full range of stakeholders? Remember that full breadth of differences. Now, number 3 is important. How might some of our conscious attitudes, some of our assumptions might be playing out about X groups? What could be the impact on each of our stakeholders if we move forward? And I'm not saying individually only. I'm really thinking groups of stakeholders by all those differences we talked about. How could this decision advantage some, give someone an easier way to succeed, but create barriers, obstacles, maybe even disadvantage others? And finally, how can we make this process, program more inclusive, just in general? Now, you can put these at the bottom of every agenda as reminders and make sure the leader, no decision gets made until the group has worked through these. Now, you may have 3 or 4 ideas you're thinking about as a group. Maybe you get 3 or 4 folks to take them, use these questions, and come back with recommendations. But if you do these questions for several months, it'll get in people's DNA. And then they will start doing this on their own when you're not there as the leader. Again, they have to have all the differences that make a difference. When I do workshops, I have about 10 or 15 more. Have to consider the potential impact across all these group memberships, privileged and marginalized groups. So let me show you how this works. You have people think about what's the intent of the idea we're about to consider and what could be the impact of cross-group membership. And then you analyze the decisions. So have each group talk about, well, what's the intent? How does this align with our strategic goals? What are the assumptions behind it? Whose needs it meeting? Whose needs will be met? And then by group membership, who might have some, notice the word, unintentional negative impact, face barriers, obstacles, disadvantages. If people have not done a lot of equity inclusion training, if they're not at least moderately skilled in their cultural competencies, you want to use the word unintentional quite often. If not, you'll get all kinds of fragility, white fragility, male fragility, leader fragility, defensiveness. So it's all unintentional, generally, through implicit bias. But if you want results, then I would encourage you to use unintentional until you get people skilled up so they have the capacity and the willingness and the courage to name biases they're bumping into and honor them and honestly name them. So let me tell you a story how this worked. It's Wednesday afternoon. A manager happened to be in one of my sessions, and afterwards they said, I'm going to use these skills. I'm going to bring all my people together because I have a major decision I have to give to my vice president Friday morning, 9 a.m. I'm going to throw out what I wrote out, and what I'm going to do is get people together and everybody, mandatory meeting, we'll talk about it, then I'm going to type up the collective ideas. Oh no, I just remembered I'm out of town tomorrow. I'm off with a customer. All right, Friday morning, 9 a.m. All right, I'm going to call a mandatory meeting at 9 a.m. Friday. I just looked at them. I heard their good intent, but I asked them, so I hear your good intent. You want more inclusion, but by group membership, who could easily get to your 7 a.m. mandatory meeting? And who by group membership? Now, we still had that slide, so I put it up. I said, and who by group membership might have some obstacles, some barriers, and if they can't attend, how might they get consequences from their peers, their team leaders, or unconsciously from you? And so the manager sat there and they were like, oh. So I want you right now, just kind of reflect. 7 a.m. mandatory meeting, people get maybe a day to do all kinds of life changes, juggling to get there. Try to pick 4 to 5 groups that would have difficulty getting there, if not impossible to get there. Now, you might have named disability status, your economic socio-class background, your geography, and that one's not up there, but where you live, the transportation you have access to. Some people have 2 and 3 jobs, and so they are barely getting to work at 9 a.m. because they just left a job at 8 o'clock. So just keep breathing. Parental status is always the first one, and that's related to relational or marital status. Are there people in your family status that can help if you have to leave earlier than you would plan? So just kind of keep reflecting. Now, what you just did was took one practice that seemed like a great idea, and yet how you were implementing it had a differential impact across group membership. We need to step back and consider the impact across the full range of group memberships, each and every current decision, and then go back and train every employee, every leader to analyze everything we're already doing. So you empower all team members, all leaders to take a look at every policy, service, program, practice with an inclusion lens, and then regularly practice and analyze the current ones in group meetings until it becomes second nature to do it and ask these questions. All right. 4th set of skills I want to highlight today. What do you do when team members begin to burn out? Now, it's critical we do not overlook this leadership responsibility to promote self-care and team care. So are the people you're working with burning the midnight oil, overly focused on FaceTime, moving as fast as they can, looking good? Are they juggling so many activities, going in so many different directions that they have lost track of why they're doing what they're doing? Focused and talking about how busy they are, how much they're working, instead of how they are working, the quality of their productivity, the quality of their working relationship, how connected everything they are doing is to the key strategic priorities and what meaningful results they're getting. That's what we want to be focused on. But I grew up in a time where activity, busyness, what was valued, FaceTime, you don't leave till the leader leaves. That's what was valued as opposed to the quality of our results. And so you could do a workshop or a team meeting where you ask people from 0 to 10 and notice the ... on the 10. How much do you need self-care? How much do we as a team need self-care right now? And have people reflect, do a one-on-one conversation, and then talk as a team. We know this. You cannot pour from an empty cup. We have to take care of ourselves first. And yet often our climate, our culture, the way we've set up the workplace do not reinforce good self-care and team care. But the consequences, when people are burning the candle on both ends, they're exhausted, consequences in their personal lives and their health and the quality of the work, self-care, team care is a business issue, a core business issue. So you can facilitate conversations about, so what are your warning signs? What have you noticed lately? Now, some of these might be similar to the triggered warning signs when you have a hot button, because when we're tired, we're stressed, we're far more easily triggered. But there's still some additional ones. And so you can have people, again, either name them or find a worksheet or just write down and then fold them up. That's my favorite activity. Write down 3, fold them up, trade them, read them into the room. So no one has to own what they have yet. We just get a full breath of them. Some ones that I know, when family or friends start telling you they're concerned you work too much, when you're getting sick more often, You miss deadlines, you forget things, you look forward to 5 o'clock more than you did before. So have that conversations about warning signs, and on 0 to 10, where are they in their current life? Now, you do have hierarchical supervisor relationships in the room, so I just want to suggest strongly that you offer this as a reflective conversation that people don't have to share. In fact, you encourage them to go home and think about it, talk to people in their lives. But you do believe that self-care and team care is related to high-performing inclusive teams and retention. And so you believe it's important to invest in employees and look at our culture and our climate to shift it to align to our core values around valuing people. And people don't have to share too much about who they are and what they're doing. An activity you ask people to do on their own is ask them, how satisfied are you with the different parts of your life? And again, I would not share this even with another person, but I'd give them a handout if you have a video about it. What's the quality and satisfaction of the different aspects of their lives? Now, as an organization, I would have resources to support them on their way, whether that's resources within HR, some trainings, employee resource groups, counseling, community groups that support people looking at different parts of their lives. Some organizations that are large enough will have a wellness program that can be one that people participate in. And you could anonymously have people, I don't know, maybe with dots. It's not totally anonymously, but you could ask work-life balance, relaxation, joy, happiness, fun, adventure, maybe, emotional care, to fitness, exercise. Which ones do they want more of in the work environment? And they can put dots up on the wall or fill out a quick survey that's anonymous. And there could be ways that you could bring more creativity in, more meetings where they're moving meetings. People may want some social activities where they can bring people that are important to them. So there are a number of ways that organizations can gently change the climate and engagement without adding undue expectation. But often it's the climate, the culture, and the relationship with the supervisor, team relationships that also need to be looked at if we're trying to have community care, team care, self-care. Most people in these conversations realize quickly it's time for a change, and leaders realize it's time for a change. We need to slow down and talk more about self-care in our own lives and at work. When we do this, people come up with some ideas, especially if some folks are willing to share what they're already doing or want to do more of. Again, keep in mind the supervisor relationship, so maybe it's people as peers have that conversation. But particularly if you lead or have self-care workshops and trainings with the whole organizations, people might get ideas and strategies or can talk about this with people they don't necessarily work with and get some support for change. Because no matter how long you've traveled in the wrong direction, you can always turn around. And this is true for individual team members, team leaders, as well as the overall organization, and look at how well it supports, encourages self-care and team care as a business issue. And not just the surface like team picnic, those are important, but the quality of the work environment by group membership. Need to do surveys, focus groups to find out the quality of the work environment, the team conflict, the teamwork relationships, because maybe what's needed is a more significant intentional intervention to support team development. Now, Stephen Covey says, the key is not to prioritize what's on your schedule necessarily, but to schedule your priorities. I also love this Parker Palmer quote, self-care is not a selfish act in the work environment. It's simply good stewardship of the only gift I have, the gift I was put on earth to offer others. Now, I literally was just in a workshop this week at a conference, and someone said, actually, some people in my work environment overuse self-care to not do work. And so as leaders, we need to help teams negotiate how we're going to engage and support each other, and then be aware if folks are taking a lot of personal time, just talking about how they're doing, what they're needing, if they're missing meetings, if they're coming late to work. And I'm not saying hold them accountable and discipline, but to start have conversations with them about what's going on, what they need. There could be a number of life dynamics going on, and it could be a performance issue. And so start with exploring what's going on with them, and then performance as needed. So we have talked about 4 key leadership team development skill sets: how to form an inclusive, productive team from the start or revise it in a team meeting, pan and interrupt unproductive behaviors of team members and get everyone skilled up to do that, how to create and revise policies, practices, programs, and services with an inclusion lens. Again, everybody empowered and expected and accountable to do that, and how to recognize and intervene to minimize, prevent burnout. Now, I know change is hard, but if we do what we've always done, we will get what we've always gotten, those same results. And if you want something in your life you've never had, you'll have to do something you've never done. J.D. Houston. Now, it can be hard for leaders and supervisors to do it on their own, to have to quickly develop these critical skills and competencies themselves so that they can train and then expect their direct reports to do it. I believe you may want to think about having inclusion facilitators that will partner with leaders. Imagine having 1 or more employees in each department with the depth of awareness and skills, the resources to partner with leaders and supervisors to plan trainings, and then to facilitate meaningful workshops, meaningful development opportunities for employees to skill them up so they can achieve their performance and inclusion goals. Here's a few things I know are probably true. You're probably sitting at your computer watching this training, and you clearly see the organizational benefit of creating inclusive, high-performing teams. And you know you might be able to do this depth of training and teamwork on your own, but it will more likely be much more effective and efficient if you partner with inclusion practitioners in your organization to ensure an intentional, scaffold program for professional team development that creates, sustains positive impact on both the culture and the overall performance of the organization. And that's why I've created my new virtual course, Designing and Facilitating Powerful Workshops on Equity Inclusion. You know, if you want to be the change in your organization to create high-performing, inclusive teams to lead your team to better results, or if you simply want to increase your own value and accelerate your contribution to the organization where you work in the future, if you'd like to sponsor others in your organization to serve as inclusion facilitators, then this course would be for you or for those that you'd like to recommend. It is a self-paced, comprehensive, engaging course. It'll support you in these ways: to develop the critical tools, skills, and strategies that you need to partner with your team, with other leaders, with others in the organization, to develop strategic, intentional, comprehensive, scaffold training programs that create inclusive, high-performing teams. You'll learn and practice proven approaches and techniques to design, facilitate workshops that move people from denial and complacency to inspired action. And here's how we'll do it. I'll teach you the exact tools, the processes that I use personally as I design workshops, facilitate with executives, managers, teams, full organizations, create greater equity inclusion in their organizations. I do that, and the results are increased performance and productivity, and they significantly improve the organizational climate and morale for the full breadth of employees across privileged and marginalized identities. And all of this results in far greater innovation, collaborative teamwork, and exceptional customer service. So whenever you join, over 6 months of coaching and development, you'll get access to an extensive video library I've developed, extensive workbooks, and the books I've written that you can just learn what I know and then begin to do much more of what I do. You'll get new content and new tools every week, ready to use worksheets and handouts for future trainings so you can quickly design and facilitate powerful workshops that shift organizational dynamics that get results. And we'll do that through not only all of the passive self-paced learning that you'll do, but we also have 2 live calls each month. So you can get immediate support and guidance on whatever challenges and dilemmas you're facing. You get to ask the questions and I respond, and a lot of your colleagues in the course will also offer great coaching. I want to make sure you feel comfortable and confident on how to implement all these design and facilitation tools and strategies as we explore and resolve any and all of your questions and training dilemmas. I have people get on these calls and they say, I've been doing all the work and I have a workshop I need to do next week. I have 2 hours. Here's the context. And we actually will brainstorm and develop workshops right there in the call. We're going to be covering a wide range of tools. How do you develop step-by-step trainings to meet people where they are, foster faster professional growth and team building, and you'll get innovative training ideas, innovative activities to accelerate learning and behavior change. Every call, every Q&A, someone asks the questions and I come up with something I've never done before. They're very fun. So I add them to my practice and you can add them to yours. You will learn to use tools to shift difficult conversations and make them into productive dialogues, navigating those triggering moments. You're going to learn strategies to avoid the common pitfalls in design, the pitfalls of facilitation, the traps in dialogue, as well as how to anticipate and engage resistance. Design in ways that invites the resistance when it's more productive, and tools when the resistance, defensiveness comes up. How do you engage when it comes up? Because we can't anticipate it all. Again, you'll be learning the exact tools and strategies I've been getting paid to use as a facilitator, trainer, consultant for the last 35 years. So whether you want to have more meaningful and lasting change in your current organization and team, or you want to explore new and personal fulfilling career paths and inclusion facilitator, wherever you go, you are in the right place. So here's what to do next. We have two options. The course, the normal investment is $2,998. If you're ready to sign up now to become an inclusion practitioner, just click the button below. But I also am offering a limited number of scholarships up to 50% of the price of the course. So if you'd like to be considered for a scholarship, just click on the link. It'll take you to an application page. Fill out the application. Tell me a little bit about yourself and the organization, because I'll ask you a few questions, and then we'll get back to you very quickly with a response to your request for a scholarship. If you're accepted, just use the scholarship link to then pay the discounted rate. My motivation is to leave an ever-expanding legacy in the world, and so I support whichever option is best for you. The work I do every day is incredibly rewarding, and I look forward to sharing with you. Just click a button to join me on this journey. I look forward to working with you.